Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Data Neighbor podcast. Today, we only have Hai and Sravya because Sean is working on something else. But we have a really exciting topic that seems really intuitive, but it may not be to many people when we talk about the specifics of it, which is Sravya. You want to reveal what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, we're going to talk about impact. Impact from the terms of how do you want to talk about it when you want to put yourself up in front of your leadership saying, hey, I want to get promoted. That's for people who are working in a job and wanting to make sure that they get seen. And impact is even tougher for people who are trying to, look for jobs. What do they write in their resume? And if the resumes get selected for interviews, what do they talk about in the hiring manager and recruiter screens where majority of the reason why you'd be yes or no could be how impactful your work has been wherever you worked at in the past, right? So, yeah, that's the topic for today, impact. And what is it? How to, talk about it and getting into the details.
Cool. Awesome. I think in order to illustrate something like this, I think a counterexample is probably a good way to start. So, what is not an impact? Like, do you have something that comes to mind immediately?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Let me just think about it. So, the first thing that comes into my mind is everyone, especially data scientists, want to work on the most cutting edge technology, right? And want to use the XGBoost or, the now LLMs, right? And go solve a problem. But imagine you're just solving a problem with a tool and doing some research around something for the reason that it's not going to actually show any benefit to the business or for your for your product or whichever embedded space you're in, then I think that's something that's definitely not impactful. So that's what I could think of to start with. Anything that you have in mind, Hi?
Yeah. Something that I've seen, especially with very new data scientists, uh, is someone who just does something that other people asks, and then they hand it over with whatever output that they've completed, and that's it. And there's a thank you at the end, like, hey, thank you for doing the work. And then you never hear from them, and you never hear what your work become, or you never hear anything about it again. And in the industry, we often like to contrast that with, hey, did you actually do anything then? If that's the case, like you went through the motion of doing something, but then did anything really happen? Because you never hear it again. So in the old analogy of, hey, if you're in the middle of a forest and the tree fell down, only you had heard it. Did it actually happen? So
Oh my God.
that's the first thing that really comes to mind. It's like, hey, you did something, and nobody did anything with it. That's a non-impact.
So you've covered, okay. So when you said about you've given a question, you answered it, and that's it, you don't hear back, that doesn't mean it did nothing. It might have done something, but you don't know about it. So that I think is a different problem in non impact. There could be impact, but that you're not aware of, which is nothing but non impact to you because you don't know anything about it to write in your resume or to talk to your recruiter or hiring manager, right? So I would say in those cases, there's at least some solution. We could talk about it in detail. But the case that you spoke about just now, where you worked on something and what I was kind of alluding to, right? Like you worked on something, you've done this research of using, a big, like a very impressive tool to solve a problem that you kind of didn't exactly solve and it was a very low ROI. So that's another problem where you don't have an impact. So maybe in the second case that I've just spoke about, it is the type of solution that you're choosing to go after a problem. That's a problem in my second approach where your solution itself is not working. It's not going to be impactful. But your first one, which I think I would say, especially in the data space, is the most common, non-impact, right? Where you go work on this ad hoc question and you answer, and just there's nothing after. It's almost like, whatever happened with whatever you've given, you don't know anything about it. So that's, I would like you said, is also non-impact, and maybe we could probably go into details of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So with some, I guess, counter examples that we just laid out, I like them all. Like they're different flavors of non-impact. Basically, the theme is they're either not necessary or they didn't really lead to anything. Like that's kind of like the thing that I heard here. I think impact as a concept is the most murky for especially for the new folks and even for existing tenured data scientists. It's like, hey, what exactly do you mean when you are asking me for impact for, either it's promotion to the next level or as you said, like getting hired, getting noticed. What exactly is it? There are three things that I always keep in mind to kind of simplify the thing, and I'm really curious what you think about those. Impact to me should be one of three things. One is the work that you've done leads to some sort of material, measurable business impact, meaning you move the metric somehow. So, for example, you did an analysis, a deep analysis or a simple analysis that found certain insights. And then you're like, hey, this is a gold mine. We should go attack this. And then people actually did implement features, products, or build something or change something that, or you yourself might have changed something in the product somehow that led to more people using it, better engagement with it. The company makes more money because of it. Kind of like a direct linkage where your output directly links to the growth of a business or something changes with the metrics in a good way. So that's point number one. Point number two is your work led to a change in roadmap. So some sort of direction change in the business because of what you've done. So for example, you could have, again, an analysis that says, hey, this business line, there is no hope. So we got to shut it down and go somewhere else. The fact that it shut down a whole department, for example, or a product team or an entire unit is in itself impactful because you save the company from investing in something that's not worth the time and efforts, and you shifted resources away from it and onto something else. So it didn't lead to anything material in terms of measurable metric movements, but you saved the company a whole ton of headaches down the road and making better bets. And then the third one is uh, some sort of process change was done because of the output that you have. So, for example, you might have come up with a better way to run experiments at scale in your company, in which case everybody benefits. So the productivity rises because, hey, instead of running ad hoc experiments every single time, now you built a tool that's like a one-click experiment analysis and doing all of that, all of those things where everybody else benefits. That's impact. So the theme of this whole thing is all three of these points is that you changed something, and that change is actually useful to the company. What do you think, Sravya?
Yeah, I just love it. I totally love it. So to summarize, impact is you working on something that changed things. Number one, changing metrics. Number two, it could be changing the roadmap of what to go after. And number three, it changed the processes, right?
Yeah,
And I would say number one, changing metrics is more directly linked to revenue or money that the company gets. Changing decision is saving money, not going after a business, unit, and changing the direction to an entirely different area or something like that. Maybe that saves money a bit, slightly indirect. And changing processes, which helps productivity, which improves more ROI, and that like indirectly affects revenue. So do you think the impact is actually kind of linked to the final dollar value that the company gets out of the work?
Yeah, that's a great point. Everything links back to the growth of the business. Hopefully through process change, people are more productive, people can do their stuff in much faster time so that they can do more. Like that at the end of the day means they're spending more time taking more bets, growing the business, and there's probably like two hops that jumps from the initial thing that you've done to the metric being moved, and it's notoriously hard to measure. But yes, generally speaking, like in terms of the theme, in terms of the direction, that's exactly where all of these are headed.
Definitely.
And I think
And also,
maybe that's kind of like maybe that's like uh, especially for you as a hiring manager, maybe even implicitly, you're already looking for, like verbiage like that in people's resumes and stuff. And when you interview, you're looking for people that talk about certain things like that. It is not as codified as maybe some other things of like, hey, you're proficient at SQL if you're able to do joins and you're able to do them in efficient manner. So I think that's kind of like more of the difference in this podcast, in this episode where we, you know, try to wrap some structure to it.
absolutely, totally agree. But I'll tell you what, hi, now that maybe we could slightly pivot into in interviews, what do we look for? Not just in interviews, where even when we are trying to promote people, what do we look for? And what I see lacking, the most important thing that we even need that comes before writing impact on your resume or before talking to hiring manager about impact or recruiter about impact is you yourself knowing how important it is to track impact of the work that you're doing. The reason I'm saying that, I don't know about how others are today. Definitely, I meet a ton of people who do not know about the impact of their work. But I was like that when I started out as well. The what I did was majorly just, take up the work that my manager gave me back in the day when I just started right from my master's, or maybe take up questions from stakeholders and just get it answered and thought, hey, this is my job, right? I don't know. I mean, and I was heard about impact in the past. These are these questions that are asked when you're calibrated, but I didn't know the importance of it or why is it even needed, right? Until when I wanted to move out of the company and when I was searching for jobs, they were like, hey, you need numbers in your resume about all this, stuff that you worked on. And I'm like, wait, what? Really? I don't know. I don't know what it impacted. All I gave was this model to the stakeholder and the machine learning engineer deployed it. I didn't know what it made a difference in the final outcome of a user, right? Because I never followed up. I, I did not know about how important it is to follow up. Uh, and another very important thing that it just changed the mindset in me as soon as I understood this is it not only helps you in your interviews or in getting promoted, it just helps you just get excited about your work. The more you know about what you're doing to what it's impacting, it's going to get you so excited, and you yourself are going to pick stuff and prioritize them in the order of impact. And that eventually helps you in maybe changing jobs and getting promoted. But the most important thing that it helps you is in your day to day and how much fun you'll have working. Because whatever you're working on is going to make a difference. And all everyone wants to have, a contented job or not getting burnt out is to know that your work actually made a difference. And how great is that? It's so unfortunate that I didn't know about it when I started out, right? And I got to know about it through the process of, searching for jobs or wanting to get promoted. And people were like, hey, what's your impact? And that got me thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think like as data scientists, we're not salespeople, and a lot of quote unquote kind of tracking impact or, like asking people for, hey, what happened to the analysis is sort of like trying to promote your own work in some sense. And we're like, hey, we study so hard. We did technical things just so that we can move away from taking credits and, like try to stay away from that realm of the world as much as possible. But unfortunately, in the professional space, people look for that. It's okay to take credit. You may think that, hey, I did certain things, but then I found this insight. It's really mind blowing, but then it's really the engineers that actually implemented the features and the recommendations. So at the end, they were the closest to the outcome of it. But that's actually not the point. The point originates from you, what you've done, and because of your work, the the partners that you work with actually have something, a direction that they can now move towards, and then they did something, and collectively, you guys built a business. Kind of like a interdependence kind of thing. Like you can come up with things, but without your partners, it can't come to fruition. But then ultimately, it's like you guys all played a role in making sure something in the business was changed because of the output of your projects.
Definitely, definitely. I have 2 points to talk about based on whatever you spoke, right? The first one is related to what you mentioned. It is about, hey, it's okay to talk about your impact. It's okay to brag, to brag about what you've done, right? So that's one part. I have like way deeper thoughts about that I wanted to share about it. And the number two is about as a data scientist, the type of impact you create, because you are definitely not the person developing something. You're like almost like a support system, but not exactly. So I have thoughts about both of them.
I think this is a good segue to if I were to thematize what's coming up in those 2 points, it's going to be like, hey, what are the tips and tricks that our listeners can take away from in terms of the tactical things they can implement to number one to track more impact, number two or to track their impact, number two to kind of highlight the things that they deservedly should be talking about, right?
Totally, totally. The thing that I want to talk about first would be the mindset shift. And the second is definitely the tips and tricks part, right? So, from the mindset perspective, especially as a woman and especially someone that you've grown up in and in a way that, hey, whatever you're doing, you just keep doing what you're doing. It doesn't matter. You don't ask for attention that, hey, I did something great. I need to be known. So just do something and just go underground. Whatever you've done, you don't have to talk about it. This is something that I have always been like until I actually got to know about that you need to talk about impact and things like that. So, one thing that changed this perspective in me and that makes it slightly easier for me these days to talk about impact about myself and my team, now that I have a big team of data scientists, is that, and this is what I tell them too. So, the more people know the type of work and the people who are behind the work that cause that impact, the more you keep getting to work on those types of work, right? So if what you're doing is not known for the impact that it created, then you're less likely to get that type of work again. And it's less likely for you to be given the opportunity and independence to work on stuff that you want to work on to create the impact that you could create. So when you don't talk about it, people don't know about it and they just take you as a support system. But I personally believe data science could be really empowering and could be the people that literally tell the business where to go, what to look, what not to look. And this mindset shift, to be honest, started with actually owning the impact and talking about it, like going onto the stage, center stage, and saying, hey, this is the impact that my team created or this project created, and we are proud of it. And we better get to do projects like this again and again, right? So, this I think is a mindset shift and telling ourselves that, hey, whatever you're going to work on, the more you tell about it, the more people like this will get. Not just you, by the way, you're also doing it for people like you who are working on projects like that, right? You're literally making everyone in that work stream get the pride that they deserve. So that's one for me. And the second part, someone, maybe an engineering director from another place, tell me this I'm talking about is you as a data scientist are coming up with going and doing a deep dive and coming up with these insights, right? It could be through deep dive analysis. And you could come with this based on, some really complicated segmentation or some, propensity models or things like that. But whatever you come up with as an insight, it goes to the engineers and they implement it. So one of the engineering directors that told me this is that who in this puzzle, who comes up with it and implements it, right? It's like a puzzle. If that puzzle piece is lost, the output would be lost as well. And that person is the person that is key for impact. So in this case, if you remove the insight away, then there's no impact, right? So this itself shows, though you are not the person that worked on it to fruition, but without you, there's literally nothing for, I mean, there could be something that they would work on, but not the impact that you created with this insight. So I really want people to be empowered with this on the importance of the idea, the importance of a hypothesis, the importance of what engineers should go work on. It's generally lost in saying, hey, it's just an analysis that, that uncovered this. I think they should get even more weight. There should be even more weight given to this type of work. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, what do you think about this pushback? So if somebody is like, hey, if I claim credit here, the engineer is not going to be able to, or they're going to try to wrestle me for that credit. What have you seen, or I guess what sort of rebuttal do you have for a concern like that, if any?
For me, great question. But for me, hi, uh, it's like impact is like a weighted metric sort of thing, right? Going back to our data science thing. So I don't think it's like it does not make sense to one project, coming up with this big impact of moving a metric by so much should be just one person's job. I think it's a combination of a bunch of roles and a bunch of things that made this impact possible, right? So by that, I would probably give the weightage to where the hypothesis got generated from, what was the reason behind it, and then all the people that helped build it, right? So it's a combination. I don't think it's just entirely one person or the other person, right? And this is something that I think when we were working together, we've seen there's like a huge, I don't know how do I want to say it. There's like a a friction when you work on a project and you work with a bunch of others on the project. It's amazing to give credit to everyone that's involved, saying, they are contributors, they are additional contributors. It's okay. You can write your name as the author. You can have some people reviewed it along with you from your data science chain, but you should be able to give credit to everyone who contributed. This whole thing about this entire piece of pie is just mine. No, it's like think of it as a big cake and everyone gets a piece. So I think that's my answer to it. Celebrate it together. It doesn't have to be one person's thing. Yeah.
It's ironic that like we were just talking about the equation of the weighted sort of like impact is how we look at it, but in fact it's more, I would say it's more like an art than a science. Like, people know, like, hey, you were the one that came up with the idea. You were the one that came up with the evidence to support this idea. And then everyone else implemented it. And without you, this cannot happen. And then the fact that you, to your point, give credits to others who have helped in this entire journey, along with what you came up with, is just it just showcases how good of a partner you are to the team and how much of a collaborator you are. But deep inside, people know, like, hey, you were the one that came up with this indispensable thing that really moved the company. And so, for everyone who's listening, I would definitely encourage, it's okay to track your impact for sure, talk about it, and like, don't elbow others, or like try to split hair in terms of, hey, I did 20% of this thing, so I should get that much credit for it. It's okay. People know, as long as you can reliably tell people and show them, hey, this is what I've done and this is how I saw it to the end, you'll be okay.
Yeah, totally true. And it's also building trust, right? When you keep doing the similar type of stuff, you don't have to fight for yourself. Things are going to talk about, I mean, your work will talk by itself, right? That's one other thing. And now, maybe talking about tips and tricks, you just spoke about it, right? You should understand the impact, but how do you do it? It's the, I would say, the most, how do I put it? So the most uncommon thing for any data scientist or to do, right? It's basically, if you come up with a hypothesis and you have an experiment, that a set of experiments that you devise, and it goes into the roadmap. The most uncommon thing is actually talking to engineers, talking to PMs on when is the experiment that's going to be ramped, whatever the hypothesis that you gave, what were the results of it, and keeping track of it and putting them back in your doc or putting them documented somewhere. Because generally we are too busy, we get one analysis out, and then we're working on the next one and the next one and the next one, and each of them are going to start changing things in few areas, and some of them are going to make, like, actually change things for the better. Now it comes up to you to go after, maybe have syncs. Whenever you have syncs with your PMs and EMs or engineers, make sure that you talk about what was the hypothesis, what did the hypothesis result, and what is the impact, and document it. Because at the end of the day, when it's time for your contributions that you've done in the last half of your time in your company, or maybe you're wanting to move, it's going to be super hard for you to just write all these things down and think about impact for all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Continuous tracking, just like what we all do on a day-to-day basis. Just keep tracking data. Like, track data is literally the name of the game here. And I really
Yeah.
like how you talked about just following up. That doesn't take a lot of time. If you some of the very useful techniques could just be schedule something on your calendar. Like, that, hey, you put this experiment on the roadmap because of the insights or hypothesis that you generated. Maybe next week, have a 15-minute block on your calendar. First thing Wednesday morning, go ping the product team, go ping the engineering team. Hey, folks, what happened to this? And just do some lightweight touch check-ins and things like that. And it could be as simple as that to link back to the output or the outcome of your work.
Absolutely, absolutely. And whatever you mentioned, like putting things on calendar for reminders, it's like a big productivity hack. Yeah, we used it for impact right now, but you could use it for multiple other things too. Like, even it might be digressing the topic, but that's a great productivity hack right there. If you want something to be done, just put it on your calendar. It's going to remind you when it's time. You don't have to worry about getting reminded. Yeah.
Yeah. So now let's talk a little bit about what are some example type of impact that people can write about for different roles because they work on different things, right?
Definitely. That's a great topic, because when I try to, talk to people, when I'm trying to mentor them or just helping people out who reach out to me, the most important thing, especially for analysts and, people from analytical engineering, that I've seen is that they just write their job responsibilities as just worked on a dashboard for so and so, so and so, so and so. And you worked on this for so and so, queried this, built a pipeline, and things like that. But the type of work is in such a way that it doesn't directly impact metric, because you are a support system, right? So one big thing that can help you understand how to do this is just going back a step and thinking about, what does the hiring manager care? What does the company care? Why should they bring you in? Because they want to know that you're really good at what you do and you're going to make an impact in your area, right? And one way for data analysts and people who work on pipelines and dashboarding could be the size and scale and the importance of the area that you were given for dashboarding or pipelines and things like that. Imagine if the North Star for a company is weekly active users, and maybe that company also has some NOP scores, right? Like customer service, customer rating scores. There's also a dashboard for that. But if there's a person who worked on weekly active users metric as a dashboard and went into all the details into it, like, C-suite is going to look at the dashboard every single day. And if there's a person who was assigned the task, then that tells how impactful their work was and how big of an area their work was. So talking about the area of work and how many dollars you handled in your dashboards, if it's a revenue related one, and if it's like a growth related dashboard, where you tracking North Star metrics, and how important was your dashboard? Who was it regularly used by? You could call it like an executive dashboard that I track North Star metric that helped our company generate revenue of so and so. All we need is to understand what your work was and how that related to the company's business. And it's that mapping. That mapping is slightly harder for analytics professionals, especially in analysts when they try to do dashboards. But this is one hack that they could use. Talk about the area that they build dashboards on and how important it was, either from metric perspective or the stakeholders perspective, or the amount of money that area handled. That economy gives me the impact. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to kind of give an example of something that, for example, our listeners can put on their resume, it could look something like built a company level dashboard that looks at all the key metrics for all of the business lines and is accessed and used daily by the executive teams with over 500 views from the entire company, like something like that. Like that's
Exactly.
yeah, you have numbers, you have who's looking at it, you kind of touch upon how big the scope is of that
Yeah.
thing that you built, and implicitly people would know that, for example, you probably have done a lot of work making sure this dashboard doesn't crash or it doesn't
Oh,
it keeps updating and runs smoothly because if your CEO looks at it on a daily basis, you can't tell them like hey, sorry, like data is not there or data is wrong. Like there's a whole lot of
exactly.
things that comes with it as a package, right?
Totally, totally. It's like what does the sentence talk about how important your work was, right? So totally agree with your point, High. When you said executives, it shows that no, I mean, an intern is definitely not going to get an opportunity to design a dashboard for executives to look on a daily basis, right? And the amount, the structure of the dashboard, how clean it is, the titles that we use, the labels that we used. Oh my God, you could get into the details of it. So this basically shows that this person got it figured out and they can take up any task that I want to give them when they join my company. So that's what you want to give them. Maybe one other point that I kind of missed when I talked about it is what are you trying to showcase with your resume? You're basically telling them, the hiring manager, that, hey, I don't need any training. I come with expert professionalism already. I'm great at my skills. I know to do a ton of stuff. So you could directly employ me in, and I'm going to provide impact from day one. That's what the hiring manager need to get when they look at a resume. And you get all of that with the example that you mentioned, right? Hi, the scope, the importance, like who are looking at it, and how many. Like it's not just something that you've done and you left. It's being used on a regular basis. The 500 views, or things like that. So all of this tells me that this person knows how to come in and get the ball rolling. And I would love to hire someone like that.
Yeah. And if anyone is listening who is interested in maybe having us to help you take a look at what you've written or help you revise, please reach out. We're more than happy to help.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Cool. Okay. So that was a great example for the output from, like certain types of data professionals that are harder to quantify. What are some other ones?
Yeah, we could talk about data science product. We can come up with an example there. So I would say if you're working directly in the product in the embedded space, it's almost like did a deep dive analysis, came up with like a state of the union analysis that helped build roadmap for the product for so and so, and help move metrics by so and so percentage, and helped us gain revenue by so and so dollars, things like that. So, talking about probably the amount of the type of work that you've done, and also the metrics that you got to move, and also you could probably also introduce the technical details about what it was. It could be a segmentation model, it could be you've used Python and PySpark to come up with something like that, so you could include stuff like that too. And the majority that people care about is how much it moved things, and you are basically talking about moving metrics and helping build roadmap, because that's the hardest part for any prod dev org. Everyone's looking for ideas to build the next thing. And if you've already done that in your work, then you'll be a great person to get hired.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I would say it's there's so many ways that you can showcase what you've impacted. Tracking really is the beginning of it. But once it's there, you can follow a very similar playbook as what we just talked about, with something as hard to quantify as a dashboard, and just highlight what your work has led to.
Definitely. Yeah.
So let's see. Yeah, so that's a great one. Maybe do you probably this is easier, perhaps, actually very probably a lot easier for machine learning engineers or practitioners. How would you suggest them talk about impacts?
So for machine learning engineers and also data scientists, ML folks too, because they're core data scientists and core groups who also work with a lot of algorithms, I would say talk about which area. If so, there are different types of machine learning engineers that I've seen. People who work in embedded in the product and people who are in the research space. I think we ought to discuss that at some point. And how do you talk about both of them? Most important thing for me would be the area that you were working and the type of problem you were solving and how you solved it and what was the impact. So this tells me that if you've used a complicated and state of the art technique, you talk about it. And I know that you've already worked on something like that. And how much did it actually move? So every model today is embedded into product space and they're there to move metrics. So, like, I worked with notifications ML engineers who helped get more visits to the platform, and that's going to be your metric that you talk about. And in that process, you talk about what exactly you've done, what type of model you've used, and what type of tracking mechanisms you've install you've added things like that. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, so I'm taking away the theme that they're all pretty similar in terms of how you talk about them, and in terms of what sort of things you should highlight. So I think that might be a good end to this episode.
One thing I want to talk about is about the people that I've seen whose work, especially in some companies, who worked on non-product areas like experimentation team or in teams or in areas, even as a data scientist in ML, like in research spaces and things like that. How would they approach themselves? Because they worked on some tool that helped some other team. Do you have any like tips for them who are not who've not worked on an embedded space but in a core space?
Yeah, so back to the original 3 points of a structured way of thinking about impact. One is metrics, moving metrics. One is changing direction of a roadmap. Third is helping change a process because of the work that you've done. So almost everybody can link back to one of those three. And this doesn't mean if I'm a product person, certain people might have a easier time doing it than others. But then if you just keep following that sort of 3 points and try to invoke that in how you think about the impact, it should still hold. So for example, the people that are doing deep research in the experimentation team, right? They would their impact could be game changing for the entire company. For example, if your work is to build a more robust way to assign test versus control group to adjust for certain biases in the measurement, that benefits the entire company. So back to the whole thing, you changed process for how people are doing their stuff. Your scope is huge because it's a company-wide kind of thing. And so you can keep highlighting things like that to summarize what you've done and what it's led to.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, thank you for, talking about that. So I really think it starts with you believing that your work was really impactful. Once you believe that, you'll find ways to write about it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel, honestly. If you just follow what we just talked about in this podcast, 3 points, again, did it change anything that's measurable? Did it change anything in terms of the direction or the roadmap of the team or the company? Or did it change any sort of process for how people do their work on a day-to-day basis? If you can hit one of these three, then you've done impact in your work. And I believe everybody has done it. So uh, you might you might you might just talk about it as well. Uh, and the way to do it, again, as a recap, is one, track it. If without tracking it, you can't talk about it. You just don't have it if you don't know what happens. Second one is follow. Just make sure you keep, hey, I did X, and it should help you do Y. Did Y happen? Just keep doing that. Doesn't matter if you're a data scientist, doesn't matter if you're an analytics engineer, doesn't matter if you're a data platform engineer. You can always do that, and just make it concise to highlight all of that, and you'll be fine.
Totally. Follow up, guys, follow up. That's the biggest thing. Track your work and follow up on your asks, especially as a data person. It's very hard to find the impact of your work without actually following up.
Cool. All right. Awesome. If you guys like this episode and found value in it, please like and subscribe and share with your friends. And we'll see you next time.
Also,
Thanks,
let us
everybody.
know what do you want. Also, let us know what do you want us to talk about in future episodes. We'd love to come up with a conversation ourselves or with an external person to talk more about what you're looking for.
Comments below. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.